Hello, everyone. This is the FCI podcast. I'm Attila Marton, and today I have a good number of guests. The reason why is that in this episode, we thoroughly cover the topic of the brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome, also known as BOAS. And first of all, let me introduce you in some words who will help me with this tour, starting with the ladies. We have Jane Ladlow from the UK, who started researching brachycephalic obstructive airway disease in 2005, and with Dr. Liu at the University of Cambridge, she developed a non-invasive method of assessing airway function in the bulldog, French bulldog, and pug, and also introduced a clinical grading system for BOAS, and we will definitely talk about this grading system today. I'm happy to welcome Venshe Charles Cogley from Norway, who was literally born into the world of dogs, as even her grandparents were involved in dog breeding. She has had a massive activity in kynology in her country and Nordic Kennel Union. In 2014, she actively started to handle the matter of health issues in brachycephalic breeds. And in 2016, she took a key part in founding the Norwegian Brachycephalic Council. She started cooperating with Jane Ladlow and the Cambridge University to implement the already mentioned grading system and an education program for veterinarians in Norway. I'm very pleased to have Bill Lambert from the UK here with us, representing the Kennel Club. Besides being the Chief Kennel Club spokesperson and representing the KC both in the media and on internal and external committees and groups, including with the government, Bill is also connected to the health, wealth, and breeder services. He has overall responsibility for their numerous health and welfare initiatives, which include the breed health and conservation plans, tools for breeders to help breed healthy dogs, and several health schemes that the Kennel Club are involved in. And last but definitely not least, I have Dr. Tamás Jakell, the president of the FCI, with us, and he will help us to understand how the health issues of brachycephalic breeds can be maintained and assured within the FCI. I thank all of you for accepting this invitation. And first, I think we should start to talk a bit about BOAS itself. What is it exactly and how it affects the health and welfare of dogs?
Shall I start with this one, Attila?
Yes, please, Jane.
Yeah, and I'd also like to say thank you very much for inviting me on this podcast. It's a really interesting topic, and I'm delighted that we can talk about it in this way. So, brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome is an umbrella term that has been given to some of the flatter-faced dogs when they have problems in their breathing. And the problem in the breathing can be caused by having too much soft tissue. So they could have overlong soft palates, or they can have a big tongue, or it can be restrictive areas. So it might be that their trachea, their windpipe is too narrow, or that the area above their soft palate is too restricted. So it's a combination of obstruction and restriction that we see in certain breeds. And these breeds are usually the flat-faced breeds. It's a little bit of an umbrella term because the lesions tend to be a little bit different in the different breeds. So I'm kind of hoping that in 10 years' time, we won't talk about BOAS, we'll talk about bulldog-affected breathing and pug-affected breathing, because then I think we will understand what we are talking about, rather than this umbrella term that kind of affects, or that we use for every dog. It is a real problem because these dogs don't just have issues with their breathing, but they also have issues with their sleeping and also sometimes with their gastrointestinal syndrome. So it can affect also regurgitation and vomiting, and they sometimes have sleep disorders. So it doesn't just affect their breathing, it can affect other areas and other systems of their bodies too.
And it is obvious that it is not just breathing, because I have the feeling that in many cases people don't really get the whole picture, that how many further health problems it may cause. And what is the exact reason? You mentioned the tissues, but in general language, why it happens? Because we always talk about the length of the nose. Is it only the nose? Only, exclusively?
So that's a really good question. It's actually the length of the whole head. So many of these brachycephalic dogs, they have increased or premature closure of the bones at the base of the skull. So it isn't just the nose, it's that whole length of the head. And it's a little bit different in different breeds. So in the bulldog, for example, it really is usually the palate and the trachea. Whereas in the French bulldog, they have more obstruction in their nose, in their nostrils, and also in the area above their soft palate. So it varies between the breeds. The pugs come from a different lineage and their disease is different again. So yes, they have a long soft palate and they may also have a little bit of nasal obstruction, but they also seem to have a laryngeal weakness, which is the voice box. So the breeds are different. And in some cases, it's the conformation. In other cases, it might be a combination of conformation and also tissue strength. So we haven't got there yet. We're teasing out the different diseases that make up this syndrome, but we can't delineate it clearly in all the breeds as yet.
So it's a much more complex matter than just how long the nose is.
Yeah.
And what is the grading system about exactly? Because it's mentioned many times. What is the main concept behind it?
So one of the real problems with BOAS is that it is a functional disease. So you can have two dogs that look very similar, and one dog may be affected and the other dog may be completely unaffected. And we've looked for these external conformational markers. So what can you see when you see a dog that will say it may have BOAS? And there's certain things we can say means the dog is more likely to have BOAS, particularly nostril stenosis. So how open the nostrils are in the French Bulldog is a good indication of whether that dog may go on to develop BOAS. But you still can't predict from the way the dog looks that it will get BOAS or it won't get BOAS. So you have people breeding really good-looking dogs and they still may get an affected puppy, which is very distressing. So when we started off this research, we were using this plasmography chamber, which is a clear Perspex chamber. And we found that the results from the chamber correlated well with our clinical assessment. And the clinical assessment was listening to the dog before and after a little exercise test to stress the airway. And we found that we could predict pretty well from the clinical picture which dogs were going to read well in the box and which ones weren't. So the plasmography box is really useful, but it's also expensive, it's bulky, it takes a lot of time. And it takes a little bit of getting used to read the traces. So the idea that we could come up with a grading system that could be used by vets everywhere, that will give you an idea of which dogs were affected, I thought was more useful. And then what we wanted to do was give the breeders some way of screening out the severely affected dogs so they weren't bred from. So it's a way to say to the breeders, these dogs are really good, and then these dogs, please don't breed from that dog. And it seems to have been taken on board pretty well.
And what? Yes, Thomas.
We can hear you, Thomas. I just would like to be a bit less clinically proper. Why we are here? Why we are all involved in this? It's a very complex, like talking about COVID. COVID is a virus, but so many political consequences we are facing with. In a daily basis connected to that. BOAS is a little bit similar. Once upon a time, when the most popular breed in the world was the German Shepherd, some anti-breeding activities started to attack that breed because of different possible issues. Now it's not anymore the case, because by the statistics, almost all over the world, those brachycephalic breeds, especially French Bulldog, became in many countries the number one breed by the number of registration. Of course, this BOAS problem always existed in the breed, but when we registered, let's say, 100 here in Hungary, 100 puppies per year, maybe we could find 3 or 4, but now we are registering a couple of thousands. Of course, the number of the cases is much higher. I think in the latest years, we changed the narrative in the Kennel Club and also in the FCI, because if there is a problem, we cannot put it under the carpet all the time. We have to talk about it, because I'm a human doctor. the first step to heal my patient is to make a diagnosis, and then taking examination, and then the treatment. Without a diagnosis, a treatment never can be possible. So better to talk about it, better to find out how to make it better, because otherwise, if we don't do that, all these dogs will be produced without a control of any kennel clubs or any authorities, which is far from being the target of even the politicians, because that's the possibly worst scenario. That therefore, we try to be the pioneer in this way to show the people a good test can help to improve the situation. But for that, we have to register the dogs. I'm not going to name the country, but I participated in a very good conference about different health issues 3 years ago, where a very well-educated lady representing a certain kennel club and the French Bulldog Club of this kennel club stated a very complex breeding program, how to deal with this problem, how to prohibit the dogs to be bred from who's having this problem. And at the end of the story and the end of the presentation, I asked how many French Bulldog puppies you registered last year. And she said 350. And I said, in that huge country? I'm talking about a big country. And then she said, yes, it was about 6,000 French Bulldog born, but the Kennel Club only registered 300. So it's a very complex problem how to deal with it, because if we put the majority of the population out of any possible control, this is a lost game. Even the treasure, the gene pool, we are going to lose. So we have to find a way. That's why I was very happy when I participated in Norway, and it was Charlotte called me, and she was my contact person to learn about this. And Jane had a conference, a study, and then a practical exam for veterinarians in Norway. And then I understood there is a possible way to control and to select the dogs and not eliminate, but give advice which male could be bred for which female, because of this risk could be higher and lower as well. After this happened, I visited the Kennel Club and I met Jane, and the chairman of the Kennel Club was also there. And we signed a contract. And based on this contract, nowadays, every single FCI member Kennel Club is free to approach to the Kennel Club team. Jane doesn't anymore works for the Cambridge University, but still deeply involved, and she's a practicing veterinarian. So many kennel clubs, I don't know actually, maybe Jane knows more about it, how many FCI kennel clubs signed this contract and started to get a work together with. And then the kennel clubs, with the help of the FCI, will find out how to use these results, because that's another question. There are several tests in this planet for different disease, but sometimes breeders don't know how to use the results. So it's also an important thing and an important fact. And now I just had a very short talk to Jane before we started this official meeting, stating that now the FCI is even in that point that before we start to recognize a breed which can have this problem, we ask their help to test the health of this breed before we recognize them. So there are many possibilities to work together with. And why I'm so glad because of Charlotte Skogley, because she was the one actually who first came to me, and I first heard Jane Ladlow's name by her, and she was very open-minded. And when I went there and visited there, it was a great event, and I felt her passion, and I learned how much she achieved in Norway, which was a very, difficult situation to solve in Norway with politicians and animal welfare activists. Before I give the floor to maybe Charlotte, I would like to say that anybody who thinks the breeders are against of the animal welfare activists, that's not true. Every single animal welfare activity starts with a well-planned, good professional breeding program. Without it, it's not possible. We want to test the dogs as much as possible before we bred them, and we are breeding the dogs in an ideal case, but I believe most of the breeders connected to the FCI do this. We have a litter when we know we are having enough new owners who can provide the good and proper home for these puppies. So we have to work together. We belong together, and animal welfare activists cannot be enemies. If they behave like they are enemy, it's something, I think, wrong in their idea, or we have to sit down to talk to each other to understand the mutual points for the future work.
How far we are going to go back, because the situation in Norway actually in 2014 and 15 were quite desperate, because not of the bad health of the dogs, but we had to do something. We had to control the situation because many parts were getting involved. And we looked at a lot of studies, but we found that the study from Jane Ladlow was the most complete study, and also with the most number of dogs. So we wanted to rely on that study. So at the time, there were a complete mess. It was totally war. It was a lot of people involved. It was the agriculture department. It was the breed clubs. It was the kennel club. It was animal activist groups. So it was a complete mess. And we had to land this somehow. And I think I had the function as a mediator in somehow, because I was going back and forth between the kennel club and the clubs and everything. And I said, we have to come to one agreement. And we had a big meeting. I was elected into the board of the kennel club at the time. And we sat down and we said, okay, we need to do something. We need to get a representative from all the clubs. And we say, this is the Norwegian Kennel Club Brachycephalic Council, that one club with brachycephalic breeds needs to have a seat in this council. And then we went forward and we said to the Kennel Club, we want to do something. We want to rely on the study of Jane Ladlow. Can we get her to Norway? Can we have a seminar? Can we look at this grading system? And then the snowball started to roll. And this is the wonderful world of communication, because when all this was set, we felt that we had landed this. We could see what this was. We could see if this grading system was going to work. And I was at the FCI General Assembly. And actually, I was just talking to Barbara Müller, who is in the board of the FCI, and we were talking back and forth. And she asked me, how is the situation in Norway? And I tell her, well, it was a mess, but I think now we have landed it. And I told her about this. And she said, oh, my God, you need to explain this to Tamas. And then the snowball is running, and Tamas, I must congratulate him, because he's a very hands-on president in the FCI. He's not a talker, he's a doer. So from just talking about this for a long time, it actually started to happening very fast, because Tamas, as a good sport, came to Norway. And the first meeting at Lepohallen was quite historical, because we had people from the Norwegian government there. We had people from the agriculture department. We had Jane there, who was going to teach our first group of veterinarians. We had Tamas there, who was the president of the FCI. So, and the clubs were very sporty as well, because this has been very well met from the clubs. The clubs came with dogs, with English Bulldog, French Bulldog, and Pugs. And all of this now we can see we have completed our third group of veterinarians who has completed their education. So now we can give BOAS research or BOAS examination to people all over the country, from the north to the south and east to the west. So now I think we have a good number of veterinarians who have had the training program education, and now we're starting to see some results. What is quite fascinating, and I know we talked about this in the welfare committee meeting as well that we had, because what is quite interesting, and Tamas also saw this when he was at the Jane Ludlow seminar, is that the dogs that are quite according to standard, what we say this FCI standard, how we want the dog to look. The dogs that actually are quite up to standard are also the dogs that actually do quite well at the BOAS testing, and that I think is good, because we want the breeders to try to strive to breed according to standard, not to breed to fashion, but to breed the way we say that this is a functional description of how this dog is going to look. And we actually see that 31.9% of the English Bulldog that are tested has grade 0. And also 53.2% of the dogs that are tested in English Bulldog breed has grade 1. So it's actually just 4.3% that has grade 2 or worse. So I think that is quite successful. And also now we see that about 70% of the registered litters, at least one of the parents is graded with 0 or 1. So I think this is a perfect tool to use to help the breeders to come together. And it's been the breeders have been very, very have embraced this system a lot. We have not had any negative comments, or that it's too expensive, or that we can't do it, or it's too difficult, or something like that. It's been very welcoming to implement this system in the Norwegian Kennel Club. So we are very, very grateful for Jane, and we are also very grateful for Tamas, because through Tamas this is something that can be elevated up to a higher level and be distributed to the other FCI countries, because this is an important matter. And I want to follow up what Tamas said, that the activists do actually have the same goal as us. We are not enemies, because all kennel clubs and judges and breeders and everything, we do work for one thing, and that is the health and welfare of our dogs, that we produce dogs that will have long and happy life and can be good companion dogs to their owners. That should be the main goal of every dog breeding. And what is sad is that the really extreme activist groups that scream very high, they want to choose the banning of this breed. They want to ban the breed. They want to not be able to register the breed. The sad thing is that they don't understand that will only make things worse, because we see what happens when the dogs that we can offer BOAS grading to the dogs that are bred outside the system, but we will never have any chance to monitor their health or do the statistics or anything, because it's not registered anywhere. And those are the people that breeds only for the benefit of money. They don't care actually about the health or the gradings or things like that. So the main goal should actually be to try to get as many as possible into the organized dog world, not to get out of it or to ban it or things like that. Because we see, if we have clear rules, like we have now, we have implemented that in the French, English, and Pugs, the parents from this year in 2021, the parents must have a known BOAS degree. or else you will not be able to register the puppies. So we took it grading in 2019. It was voluntarily, and 2020 it was also voluntarily. And now the clubs has decided that they wanted to do it mandatory. So now you have to have the grading to register your puppies. So and there has been no negative comments from any breeders on this. And I must also say that the FCI, I congratulate them, because I've seen the illegal puppy trade campaign from Four Paws organization, which FCI is cooperating with. This is also an animal activist group, but I will say I do like their approach much more, because they do actually say that it's positive to go into the organized dog world, because then at least you can see where the dog is coming from. You can trace it. It's traceable because it's registered somewhere. It has a number somewhere. So I think to just ban everything, it's not possible, because you will always have a dark side, an illegal system who will produce as long as there is a market. And it's a market because these dogs are extremely popular as companion dogs. And I understand that, because it's very nice, kind, funny dogs to have around you.
And actually, easy solutions, seemingly easy solutions and quick solutions, seldom solves anything. In many cases, causes more harm.
And that was what provoked me at the first, because it was very, very easy, because it was, okay, the nose is too short, it's just crossbreeding it, get longer nose, problem solved. Yes. And for me, that was too easy, because that couldn't be the solution, that it was so easy.
It's a bit more complex, as we already agreed on that. The whole problem was, as Jim mentioned, it's has a really, really huge variety of different things, depending on the breed and many other factors. So the case in Norway, this case study is really positive. And what about the situation in the UK, where the grading system was first implemented? And if I'm right, the Cambridge University and the Kennel Club started to use it or develop it maybe together some years ago. Do you have the same positive experience about this, Phil?
Yes, we do. And let's go a little back a little bit. I mean, we started working with Jane, Kennel Club started working with Jane, I think more than 10 years ago. Jane was very interested in doing the research. And I think one of the things you've mentioned here is where people have a wrong impression and they get very fixed views about what situations are in dogs. And of course, it was very easy to look at breathing problems in certain breeds of dog and say, oh, it's all down to the short nose. And yes, of course, these dogs do have a predisposition. But what we were very impressed with Jane was she was doing proper research, really looking at the disease and saying, okay, why does that exist? So we started funding Jane's projects before she was actually at Cambridge, when she was at the Animal Health Trust. And the work was so important because it really provided absolute evidence of why dogs couldn't breathe. Now, we knew, we accepted there were issues with some dogs, and I can go back to I used to go to dog shows literally 20 or 30 years ago, and you could see some of the dogs that were being shown clearly had more problems than other dogs. But it wasn't easy to look at those dogs and say, okay, that one clearly, the way it looks means it's going to breathe badly, because we had populations of dogs which were very close to the breed standard, which looked exactly the same as perhaps other dogs, but they could breathe perfectly, whereas other dogs could actually struggle. And so the importance of Jane's research was to really put some evidence there and say, okay, why are these dogs having problems? Now, of course, what we saw at the same time, over that period of time, we've seen such a huge increase in the popularity of these breeds. And it's not because it's not something that any kennel club can control. Demand for breeds is very much down to public demand. And we used to literally register just a few hundred French bulldogs, for example, in the UK. And they've now become one of our most popular breeds. In 2020, we registered 36,000 of those dogs. So we had huge numbers. Now, what's happened in that period of time, when you have a few, and Thomas touched on this, when you have when you're registering just a few hundred dogs, you have a limited number of breeders. They're often very knowledgeable about what they're doing, and they would make certain precautions even before they had tools such as a BOAS grading system to help them. But they would make decisions about breeding dogs. When a breed grows so quickly and in such vast numbers, it's very difficult to retain that influence. Now, we register 36,000. There's possibly as many as 100,000 French Bulldogs being born in the UK, because we know we only register around about 30%. So you could actually say, okay, how much influence can the Kennel Club have? But we actually have to lead the way. We have to really try and demonstrate. And that's why the show ring can be very important. It's very, very important to give breeders a goal to actually try and achieve, give them a measure. Because if we don't do that, then there's what we call a free-for-all. Breeders are breeding with no control, no influence whatsoever. They're just breeding to public demand. And we've seen this in other breeds, where breeds that aren't so affected by the show ring can actually take a wrong turn effectively. So we've recognised the problem, and the point's been made of the importance of working with other groups, because other groups will listen. If you can provide evidence and show what you're doing, then other groups will engage with you. We started a brachycephalic working group here in the UK. We work with the veterinary organisations, with the welfare groups, and they can, because we all have a part to play. We don't literally own the dogs. We can have an influence, and you have to work with people who sometimes you don't always agree with, but you have to work and provide evidence and work with them, because we all have a part to play in resolving these situations. And we are actively making a difference now. And the scheme, it's been very unfortunate that the scheme has come right in the middle of COVID, because we're perhaps not quite where we would like to have been. As Thomas has said, we met across, I think, Thomas, it was 2019 or 2020. And we talked to the FCI at the time and showed them what we were doing in the UK. And what we will do, and what we're doing now, we're rolling out, we're actually, the scheme is available on license to other countries. We've spoken to around about 15 or so countries so far. We have been a little bit held up by COVID, because one of the things that we have to do, and what Jane is very keen to do, we have to obviously train the veterinarians to actually do this test. And we've been a little bit hampered because we haven't been able to travel. What we are actually providing now, we're working on an online resource which will help assist and train the vets so that they can offer this test in other countries, because it's very important. This is not just a UK problem or an FCI problem, it's a worldwide problem. And actually, by working together, we can actually help to solve it. And that's the point's already been made, but I've never yet met a dog breeder who wants to breed unhealthy dogs. They all have different motivations, but everyone wants to breed healthier dogs. And what we can do is provide them the tools to be able to do that.
Yes. The COVID was really difficult, because as we originally planned, after we made the contract with the Kennel Club and Jane Ledlow, we wanted to organize a big FCI event where all the countries which contracted already could send a few veterinarians to be trained how to do this in their own country. That was expected last summer, but of course nobody was able to travel, so we didn't even go further with this plan. But this plan still exists, because that's the way to solve the problem. When we are talking about different solutions, one is a professional one, and we have to be part of this. And the functional testing and the registration of the results is one of them. I'm not quite sure if the best way to not register the puppies of those dogs which are not perfect in a BOAS test. We should find a way how to make a registry which is not quite a full pedigree, just in order to keep the gene pool in, because maybe, and we will see, these dogs can produce something free of the disease. So it's better to think about it. Why, first of all, why these breeds are so popular now? Because most of the brachycephalic breeds has a special placement of the eyes. They are looking forward, not sideways. And it gives them a kind of human expression. And that makes everybody emotional. That's why the market is increasing so much. They don't care if they have a pedigree or test or not. So that's why we try to keep our hand on it and to keep an influence in a good way. Why is it a problem when politicians try to solve this problem? That's not a problem they try to solve. This is correct. But the way how they started could be having a partner which is professional in the way and working together with those, or to make bans. You are not allowed to have this, to breed this breed anymore. The only and solely affected, badly affected population is the breeders, the registered breeders, because a kennel club can get a directive. Your kennel club is not allowed anymore to register this breed. But if I'm having the same dogs being registered by my kennel club, nobody can tell this is a purebred French bulldog. It looks like, maybe, but I can say the father was a whippet. It looks like the mother, but it's not a French bulldog, for sure not. And what I wanted to say, the commercial breeders, without registration, without any test and control, can get the whole market. So I think, if you think about it, in most of the countries, by the statistics, if we take the whole dog population 100%, usually around 10% of the dogs registered by the kennel clubs. The rest are not purebred or just look-alike dogs which are not registered. Why any politicians would try to pull this 10% down to 2% and keep the 98% in the black or gray area where there are no tests has been made, no rules and legislation about the breeding exists. That's a very bad step, and it makes the situation much worse than actually is. But for that, we have to do two things. First thing, to do our job better. And this method, what Jane offered and used, is one of them. And second, what one of the politicians said, if we are doing well, that's not enough. It has to be visible we are doing well. So we have to get more connection with politicians and even animal welfare activists. That's why what Wenche already mentioned, the FCI in its new committee, which is a health and welfare committee just established not long ago, but they are working very actively. We created a kind of window from the FCI to the society, and we invited animal welfare organizations. They are not members of the FCI, but now they understood what we do, and we also more understand what they do, and it works very well. Let's say, in a lovely summer afternoon, I was sitting in the FCI office, which is in Belgium, and then a delegation of one of the animal welfare organization asked for a meeting, and we had a meeting. 3 of them came, and the whole conversation started like, we are enemies. We are doing things what they don't like, so on. And after 2 hours conversation, which is not so long, and it was not a wasted time in any way, they stood up and we agreed which are the mutual point we can work together. And now this organization became a member of the FCI Health and Welfare Committee. We need to talk to people. we need to find a way how to approach, how to sell our good ideas. And actually, this kind of podcast is one of the many different options to do so. That's why I'm so happy you are sitting here. And now I stop.
Can I just talk just to support what Thomas says about banning breeds, because we have a very live example in the UK of trying to what happens when you try and ban a breed. In 1991, the government brought out what was called the Dangerous Dogs Act. It was one of probably the worst pieces of legislation that's ever been through the House of Commons, but it actually did strive to ban the breeding ownership of pit bull terriers. Today, we have probably more pit bull terriers in the UK than we've ever had. And all you do is you push people away. If you push people away and ban and demonize breeds, all you actually do is create a market for them. The point's been made that different countries register very low, surprisingly low proportion of dogs. We register slightly more in the UK, around about 30%, but it does mean that 70% is outside of our influence. So if you try and ban a breed, all you do is drive it underground. It's far better to work with the responsible breeders, work with government, and get to a situation where we all achieve the same thing, where we achieve healthy dogs that can be owned by people who want to give their dogs good homes. So banning breeds simply doesn't work, and it's what we call, it's a very blunt instrument to actually try and deal with a problem, and it simply doesn't work. And I'm hoping that our government in the UK recognises where it has made mistakes and won't try to do the same things again. We've got to. This is why we do work with other organisations, because it's not just a kennel club problem. It's a problem that affects everybody.
Yeah, politicians and government usually never wants to do any bad things for the public because they want to exist and continue the power, having a power. But sometimes they do not know how to do it and who can be the right partner to give good advice. So that's why in a peacetime, the kennel clubs in different countries and the FCI itself has to show itself as we are a proper partner, not enemies. Unfortunately, we have to talk about it, even if it's very conversational. Some animalists are using a lot of money founded by different organizations, and they are much easier to get contact with politicians because of their background. That's one of our challenges. We are not working for money, and we have to show ourselves what we want, what we are doing for. And I'm going back to the main topic, original topic. We are a possible and good partner with goodwill. Yeah, but it's a difficult job, an everyday job, and of course, not can be done only when it's a war. It has to be done constantly in a peacetime to get the contact, because then we can ask those contacts in the case of war.
And honestly,
yes.
Yeah. Just quickly, just to close this idea of Tamás, that when you offer and when you have a problem and you offer two solutions, and in case if we are talking about reclassified breeds, I offer option A to set up a complete system based on science, and you have to read a 20-page scientific paper to understand the situation behind.
We did actually. The FCI did so.
But when I'm talking about...
Send it all the kennel clubs which are the member of the FCI for further use. And I hope they use it in the right way.
Yeah, but I'm talking about political decision makers. When you say that you have the problem and option A, to set up a complete system, educate people, engage and involve veterinarians, educate them, do things which take time to have a kind of effect. This is option A, and we have option B when you say that dogs should have a longer nose. Which one is easier to implement? And it's an absolutely different question that probably scenario B wouldn't be that effective, or probably it would cause more harm, as you mentioned many examples. So and that's why I also mentioned that sometimes easy solutions do not really work. And one important thing, and it was mentioned by Tomasz before, that why these breeds, and I'm talking now about the brachycephalic breeds, why they are so popular, because not just the human-like face, but it's like the structure is really similar to a human baby. And Tomasz mentioned that people don't care about the possible health problems, and then comes again the importance of communication towards the society, where to keep a pug, keep a French bulldog, but consider your decision, not just to go to any kind of online platforms to buy the dog. And staying at the world of breeders, what I've learned so far about the grading system as a solution, it is a very complex thing, because just a bit summing up, we have science, we have papers, we have scientifically proven concept behind the grading system, how to test the function of these dogs, and besides that, there is a complete structure how to implement, because you have to engage the breed clubs. We often forget about the importance and responsibility of breed clubs. We have the breed clubs, we have the breeders, and as I've learned today, we also need the help and the engagement of the vets. What was your experience, or what is your experience still during the implementation of the whole grading system? Because just following the news and the reactions, I perfectly know that there are groups of veterinarians who are completely, I wouldn't say completely against, but in many cases they are completely against brachycephalic breeds, and they say that, these breeds should be banned completely, or they should be outcrossed with any other breeds just to have a longer nose. So what is your personal experience with engaging veterinarians?
Let's touch on that first of all. So I completely understand why some veterinarians may be completely anti-brachycephalic breeds. And it's quite simple, because veterinarians will see the very worst examples. They will see dogs presented to them that have breathing problems that are quite distressing. They can see dogs almost dying before their eyes because they have these really bad problems. So faced with that, it's completely understandable why some veterinarians may be completely against the breeds. But of course, we see, and we have what we call a biased population, because a lot of the dogs that we see are the healthy examples. So it is really an area of education, and we have to give these tools that we give. The respiratory function grading scheme is a breeding tool, and alongside that breed, we have to give breeding advice. I'm going to hand over to Jane, because I think, Jane, you're the best person to talk about. We come up with a traffic light system in the UK, a traffic light system, because it's very important that breeders don't simply, we have an expression in the UK, throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's throwing, you breed for many years, breeding lots of good points into your dogs, but then you discard it because it has one problem. We don't want to encourage breeders to do that. So, Jane, can I hand over to you to talk a little bit about the traffic light system? Because I think that's very important.
Yes, you can. And I'd just like to take a step backwards and talk about the vets. So I have a lot of sympathy with vets that are fed up about treating brachycephalic airway dogs, and it is distressing. I actually found that the English vets were really highly engaged and very keen to help us with this system. And I think one issue is that the vets weren't quite sure how to grade the dogs themselves. So you got some vets that will be looking at puppies with narrowed nostrils and wanting to operate on them, even though they had no airway disease. So at least now we've given them some guidelines, which we've also published on the Brachycephalic Working Group page as well, on these are the dogs that you should consider treatment in. And these dogs are fine because we're not looking at anatomical lesions, we're looking at the overall function. And also, if you are treating these dogs, and many vets are, we now have a way that we can audit our cases before and after surgery, because before this, we didn't know if the surgery actually worked. It does, in most dogs to a reasonable degree. So So you're giving vets tools that they can use across the board. And it also gives them a way to discuss with owners. So if you have a dog that comes in and it's got airway disease, that's quite a tricky discussion, particularly if the owner doesn't recognize it. And if you can now talk about the grading scheme when these dogs are brought in as puppies, you've opened up the conversation in a non-aggressive manner, so that you can pick up the dogs earlier, and actually it becomes a more of a health check rather than your dog has got disease. So I think the vets were quite pleased to have these grading tools, and I've had no problems in having very good assessors recruited onto the system in the UK. The trick with the Norwegian system was that you need the top people in the country to be independent, okay? So not to be linked to the kennel club or to the breeders. And in the Norwegian vets, I was super lucky that I had 3 people I knew very well there. So Christina, Thomas, and also Tonya, and they're all European diplomats. So these are people that have done extensive training, and they are very well qualified, and they're generally respected by the rest of the veterinarians in the country. So you're not putting somebody up there who they won't listen to. They'll listen to these people. So if you can get that tier correct, then usually the rest of the population will go along and just be pleased that somebody can give them ideas on how to actually grade these dogs and when we should be treating or when we should be encouraging people to breed. Now, back to Bill's original point about when do we say you should breed or not. So we have 4 grades of dogs. We have the dogs that are completely unaffected, grade 0 dogs, nothing showing at all. We have grade 1 dogs that have got very mild disease, which isn't causing them any what we would call clinical effects. So these dogs have a very good quality of life, no effects at all. And then we have the grade 2 dogs that have some degree of disease, and some of them need treating, some of them may be older and have actually had very good life. And then the severely affected grade 3 dogs. And the grade 3 dogs should not be bred from. Because you've got a good chance of producing affected puppies, and also from a welfare point for that particular dog. Okay, if you have a dog that can't breathe and you make it pregnant, then it's going to have bigger issues with breathing. So from a welfare point and a genetic point, it's a no-go. But we didn't cut out the grade 2s. And the reason we didn't cut out the grade 2s is because some of those grade 2s might have very good other points. And if you cut the gene pool down too fast, you're going to have other diseases coming up. So maybe you're going to get more disc disease, maybe you're going to get more eye ulcers, but other things will start to show. So cutting down a gene pool really quickly is not a sensible thing to do. Okay. Now in the UK, in our show dogs, about 15% of those dogs were severely affected when we did the original research. Okay. And if you cut out that proportion of the dogs, that's a great start. Now I listened to Wench's point about her dogs that are coming through are doing really well. That's true. And we're seeing the same thing in the UK, but those dogs we're seeing in the UK that are coming through are young dogs. So we're seeing the 1-year-olds and the 2-year-olds coming through, and this is a progressive disease. So we don't really know how many dogs we're going to have affected until we have followed these dogs for 3 or 4 years. And that's why we're very careful to put in the grading system that we want to check them every 2 years. Okay. So I think taking the 3s out is complete sense for both for that dog and also for the gene pool. But I think with the 2s, if I have a good 2, then I'll say, look, fine to breed, but make sure you breed with a dog with open nostrils, or you want a slightly longer nose or a longer neck, and you can just guide them. Or you want a dog that hasn't got this kind of noise. So the grade 2s are certainly not to be pushed out the gene pool immediately. If we get this right, in 10 years' time, hopefully we'll have no grade 3s. And then we can come back to that grade 2 and we can split the grade 2s, okay? But at the moment, we're just taking out the severely affected dogs. And we are seeing a lot of very nice dogs coming through, but we'll need to watch this grading scheme for probably 5 to 10 years to see how effective it is.
What is the age you recommend to test the dog first?
So that's a really good point, Thomas. At the moment, we're saying you can test from 12 months because that's what we validated the original data on. Okay. Now, the pugs have come in and said they want the dogs tested at 2, which is great. Okay. Because most dogs, if they have got severe BOAS, are presented by 2 years of age. However, the bulldogs like to breed some of their dogs earlier, so they are still using 12 months. So you can push, you can nudge, but actually, if the breeds want to breed early, then let's get them tested at 12 months, okay? Because some of the dogs will still show signs at 12 months. And actually, the bulldogs are doing super well. So 10, 15 years ago, you could hear these dogs outside a bulldog show. And the last bulldog show I went to, they were great, okay? So they are definitely working on it. And that's the other thing to say is, in addition to the vets being educated, the breeders are now educated. So these breeders know what we are talking about, and it's become almost socially unacceptable in a bulldog show to have a really loud bulldog in there. Okay, so it's almost getting to the stage where they'll police this themselves, which is perfect. Okay, so it's not just the vets; it's the breeders that totally understand what you're talking about. In most cases, the breeders are ahead of the vets actually in this syndrome, and they are now taking this on themselves, and they know which dogs are affected. Okay, so the breeders will tell me if they've got an affected dog, and I'll agree with them. Okay, so it's nice that we all are talking the same language.
It sounds almost as a fairy tale, because it is good to hear that you didn't really have to fight just to convince people that this is the right path. And it was
Attila, I just want to come in there. I did fight, but I fought 15 years ago.
Okay.
So that's
okay. It is not the Disney kind of fairy tale, but all the effort and all the research and everything just paid out. And it works.
I think the breeders could see that we were giving them a way forward. Okay, so we weren't just standing there and saying, "Look, your dogs are terrible." We're saying some of your dogs are good and some of your dogs aren't so good, and that gives them somewhere to go. Okay, and it's difficult when you get the vets that are really upset about this, because I can understand it. But actually, I've seen some really good dogs, that have a great life. And I've seen 10, 12-year-old bulldogs, Frenchies around. So there are good dogs out there, but you don't see those dogs unless you go and look for them. Okay, so maybe I see both sides.
Yeah, and probably that's why it was not that complicated to engage breeders to be partners in this, because it was a while ago when I read the famous Cambridge paper, which was published in 2019, if I'm right, or maybe previously, no, 2017, sorry, and the narrative of the whole paper was about finding the solution and not just about what is bad, what you shouldn't do, but it was offering a solution for the whole problem. Because I think it is the most annoying thing when, okay, I know there is a problem, but please help me what to do. And this paper is perfectly shows that kind of attitude. And I'm sure it was not an easy path, and I'm sure it's still not. But it seems that the whole system, I mean the grading system and the whole infrastructure which is necessary to implement it, is working. And what can you recommend, any of you, all of you, to those kennel clubs who are about to implement the grading system in the future? What are those weak points? What is that thing that they should really take into deep consideration to have successful implementation of the system in their own country?
So the first thing is that conversations with breeders have become more easy about health over recent years.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's many breeders are in denial about health issues these days. I think most breeders are willing to talk. The approach that's worked for us in the UK is having that dialogue, opening that dialogue up, talking to breeders. Vets can't work without breeders, and breeders can't work without vets. So you need to work together quite closely. And I use an expression, the truth will set you free. Use the evidence, be guided by the evidence. We hear the scientists and government tell us that with the COVID vaccine. Trust the evidence, and we do work with the evidence with BOAS. You have to look at what you have available, what evidence there is out there, and be guided by the research that's out there. And that approach has worked very well for us.
I think you need to be very careful who you get in as your chief assessors. So I think in each country you need 2 or 3 vets that are highly respected by the veterinary profession, and then I think it will move forward. The only other thing I wanted to say was that the grading system at the moment works on the Pugs, the Bulldogs and the French Bulldogs. And we're at the moment, we've started a study. So I'm back in Cambridge doing a little bit of research for 4 years, and amongst other things. And we are looking at other breeds. So because there's no point using our grading system on, say, an Affenpinscher where I barely see disease, or a Boxer, which I have never operated on a Boxer, because, they're never going to be any grade 3 dogs, right? So for these breeds, maybe we need to define what is an affected versus a non-affected dog. And then we can, and it's, it'll be a lovely situation if we're struggling to find some of the airway diseases in these breeds. Okay, so at the moment, it's only for those 3 dogs. And the next 4 years, we're going to try and define what's happening in the other brachycephalic breeds, and then maybe we can rename this condition. Instead of having a brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome, we can make it a little bit more specific.
Okay. And it's interesting, the reason that we've actually funded that additional research is simply because other breeds were coming to us. They love the look of these schemes so much. The King Charles breeds come to us and said, we'd like to do something similar for our breed. Can we use this scheme on our breeds? Of course, they can't, because the research doesn't support it. So we're looking at the other breeds to say, okay, can we develop this scheme in the same way?
I think I need to say that it all depends on the great work that has been done, but also I must say is a little bit time, place, and person as well, because I think we owe Jane really a big thanks in the world of breeders and kennel clubs, because the way she communicates and the way she works with people, I am forever grateful, because it has taken the dog world light years ahead. Because the way it was with health breeders, veterinarians were the enemies and and this couldn't go on. So as Jane said, you need some respectable, yes, but you also need someone who knows to talk to the breeders. And the way Jane does that, she doesn't I don't know if I find the right word now, but she doesn't condemn anyone. She doesn't say that, oh my God, your breeding is so bad, or this is a good dog, but this is a bad dog. The way she communicates, she say, okay, we have some bad dogs, we have some good dogs. Let's make progress. Let's go forward. So it is a little bit about people, the right people, and the right time. And I'm not sure that this would be so great with someone else. I must say that. So I'm forever grateful for that. And the whole combination with Bill Lambert in the Kennel Club, with Tamas sitting on top of the board of the FCI, the right time and place, Jane with her research. So I think it's all a result of the right people at the right place and the right time. That because something needed to happen, but I'm not sure if the result would have been so great if Jane couldn't communicate with the breeders, because the breeders sometimes feel a little small against the veterinarians because they feel that the veterinarians can be a little patronizing, and the veterinarians feel that the breeders can be a little stupid and responsible. So I think here is about building bridges between two worlds. And I think no one else could have done it like Jane had done it. So I'm very grateful.
I think, of course, I can share the opinion of Wenche, because this is, I'm forever grateful for this achievement and the partnership with Jane and the Kennel Club, actually. But I think this case, in a way, a kind of pioneer case, because first of all, we faced with the problem very prompt. We didn't wait so much. Secondly, we asked for professional help. If you look around the world nowadays, there are several problems in our everyday life. And the answer we try to give always emotional, and in a very few cases, professional. So that's why I think this approach, what we started now, shows even the world, not just the kinology, a professional help and a professional solution should be tried at least. And the evidence shows us this is a good way and the right way. So we continue in this way. Also, I think because of the of the reputation of the breeders are not increasing all over the world, let's say. We have to show in many different ways the professional background behind us. That's why I'm a surgeon, I'm not a genetics, but I'm quite happy with the future possibility. We already started with the DNA projects, in different fields like MyDoc DNA and the Wisdom Panel, which gives the possibility for the breeders for the future to use new professional technology for breeding program. They can test if the male and the female I would like to put together because I like them inside and outside. The risk of any genetic problem is high or not too high. If I can read these results, it's not about, I'm not going to choose a male to my female on the internet because of the results. But if I have 2 or 3, which is in my mind, male, to use to my female, I can check those 2, 3, which gives me the less risk to have a health issue, genetic health issue. So I think we are really knocking on the door, which is slightly opening of a new era. It's not easy to accept it. Like I'm not a young boy anymore, but I feel myself maybe younger than I am. But I think we have to lead the next generations. Now there are more than one generation behind us through this door, because that's what gives the reputation of the breeder back, I think, and that's the way it should be done. So that's why I'm very grateful we can make this partnership. And I have to add again, hopefully, if these restrictions of traveling will be easier next summer or even next spring, the FCI still would like to organize, maybe in Norway, because actually we've been offered the place where we've been, a training of you, and then the FCI countries can send their veterinarian contracted by their own kennel club to get a training and to make it really practically as international as it should be. I think this international approach even can make your job more, give a bit more, even more validation, because the broader scale you use the system, the more valid are the results for you, for yourself, for the future. As you already mentioned, the system is working, but it's not in its final stage. It can be improved. It can be divided, as you said, grade 2 can be divided in some breeds for even more for the future, but for that experience needed. I think the will of the FCI Kennel Club presidents are there. Sooner or later, they will all find out how important is this one. And we would like to have this meeting, if you agree. We talked about it last year. Next year, spring or summertime, depending on your time. But first, we had to create a pool of interested kennel clubs, what we are already having now. Because as far as I know, something like 15 FCI kennel clubs contracted and started to have a communication. So for sure, those 15 countries will send somebody, and we make a promotion to get it even more. So that's what we are planning in order to the breeds. One more thing I have to mention, which we didn't talk about any breed, even brachycephalic breeds. All of these breeds are part of the national cultural heritage. So if you want to tell me from a country how to change the Hungarian Puli, let's say the Hungarians will have some words for you. So it's the same in French Bulldog or Boston Terrier, all these brachycephalic breeds. It cannot be done without the country of origin. If anything being changed, it can be initiated by researchers, but it has to be agreed with the country of origin because that's their product and their heritage. So it's a very complex problem, but these political issues can be done and promoted by the FCI. So that's not a problem. But the professional part of it is what makes us difficult to get. That's why I like this cooperation.
And it's this whole story, if I can call it story, perfectly shows that to solve complex issues, you have to cooperate with other stakeholders. Without that, you can't achieve anything at all. And it is obvious for everyone that the solution is there. It is open for everyone. The system based on science works. It is obvious that it is not just about the length of the nose of the dogs. And this is a chance which is open for everyone out there who would like to cooperate and who would like to solve the problem as it is in the long run, not just to show some kind of easy solutions. I do thank all of you for being part of this episode today, because I'm sure it is obvious now for everyone what the real problem is, what the real causes are in case of these diseases. And it is obvious that there is a solution. We just have to act. So it is available for everyone, of course. So I do thank all of you for participating. And I do hope in some years we can have an updated version just to present the results, the effectiveness of the whole grading system and all the efforts of the scientists, the VEST, the Kennel Club, the FCI and the FCI Kennel Club. So thank you again.